If we were to consider the impact of adding a second track where a single track currently exists, what would be the outcome of that in terms of learning and development for children? First, let's deal with concentration and attention. In order to learn, you have to be able to focus on the material that you're studying. You have to be able to pay attention to words being given in a classroom or by a tutor at home. You have to be able to read sentences and paragraphs in books. And the ability to do that is consistently interrupted by loud noise and vibration that draws attention away from the material that you are attempting to focus on and have to learn. This may result in people having to reread sentences and paragraphs. It may cause frustration for people that are trying to learn something complex, especially it involves learning literature or learning math or science, or an area in which a particular individual finds they have to use greater concentration and focus in order to master a particular subject. So I would have concerns about the presence of railroad noise in proximity to a home where there's a young child growing up and learning. Now, if we back up before grade school to infancy, we're talking about a situation in which the exposure to noise and vibration causes, in addition to the cognitive focus issues, also certain biological responses. Now, we find that this occurs not only in infancy, childhood, adulthood, all the way into gerontological populations, that noise and vibration are stressful. And that stress produces certain biological changes in the body and psychological reactions as well. The studies have shown that exposure to noise increases cortisol levels. That is a stress hormone. There have been studies that demonstrate an increased risk of heart attack for people who are exposed to noise and vibration. And I suspect that particularly if it's random, that effect is likely to be greater. Would adding a second track have an adverse impact on an individual's relationships at home? Would it have an adverse impact on family dynamics? Would it have an adverse impact on after-school studying, having dinner together after work and after school, and the family bonding time? There have been studies that show that blood pressure, hypertension, goes up when people are exposed to noise from construction, from trains. Children, I think, are the highest risk group overall. There have been studies that show that attention deficit disorder is associated with increased environmental noise, and these are great causes of concern that I would have. We already know that presence of noise, environmental noise, is associated with increased rates of hypertension and increased rates of heart disease. If an individual is not able to get out of their home, if they are homebound or spend most of their time or more of their time at home than most other people because of an illness, then they can't get away from the repetitive noise. It goes on and on and on all day. It continues to batter them. It continues to beat on them, hammer at them. And the effects of this over time can cause depression and anxiety. The effects of stress and stress hormones over time cause people to feel irritated. There's, at the very least, annoyance. But that irritation and that stress cause people to be short with each other. They may have difficulty allowing themselves to experience tender, intimate feelings. They may become irritable to the point of anxiety. And that anxiety could cause people to become defensive, can interfere with communication with a partner, can interfere to the point of causing arguments. The arguments that result from the stress of being made irritable by frequent bombardment of environmental noise can affect the quality of relationships and marriages, can affect the quality of relationships between parent and child, between a caretaker and somebody that needs their help. And these adverse effects are such that they can seriously destroy the quality of people's lives? The problem is still going to remain in the low frequency spectrum of sound. That area of vibration that you feel and as well as hear. And of concern to me is that although as we age, we generally tend to lose our highest frequency of hearing, the mid-range and the low range generally remain as we age and get older. So people are going to be exposed to vibration and subsonic vibration that they're going to feel. They're still going to be exposed to low-frequency noises that are much harder to mask by using things such as multiple-pane windows or sound-resistant doors. I don't know that there's such a thing as a soundproof door. People commonly use the word soundproofing, and that's a matter of degree. There are certain sounds that are so intense or such a place on the frequency spectrum that it may be impossible to mitigate against effectively. So my concern is the low frequency end of the spectrum, the vibration. Doors may still rattle, dishes may rattle, cabinet doors may shake, just from the vibration transmitted from the rails into the earth, through the foundation, and up into the house. Well, I think it's reasonable to infer from the research that exists that an increase in the frequency of these sounds and vibration episodes, as well as the increase in the volume, the noise, and vibration of these trains, would result in a corresponding increase in the adverse effects, that you'd see a measurable increase in the problems with concentration and attention and learning. You'd see a noticeable increase in the amount of stress. To have two trains passing by each other simultaneously, dealing with the sound, the Doppler shift of the sound, particularly as it comes from different directions at different pitches, is such that it probably is going to cause people to feel a greater level of stress and anxiety than a single sound coming from a single direction, as damaging as that in and of itself is. I was a secondary responder to the 9/11 terrorist attacks in New York, and I've worked with other forms of trauma. And it's interesting how cues that resemble or symbolize an aspect of a trauma can reawaken and evoke traumatic memories, feelings, and cause a recurrence of stress, flashbacks for individuals that have been exposed to these traumas. When you're dealing with an area such as Northridge or the San Fernando Valley or Southern California in general, you're dealing with a place called earthquake country. Earthquakes do and have happened here. We, of course, know of the 1994 Northridge quake, which was devastating to the community. And what I learned in my clinical practice was that individuals who survived the earthquake began to experience reawakening of the trauma. People that had their homes red tagged, people that had their homes yellow tagged, people that just suffered destruction in their home. When they would hear such things as the rumble of a train in the distance, that rumble, before you're able to identify it as a train, sounds to many people and is experienced by many people as an aftershock or a new earthquake. And it perpetuates the experience of the trauma, and the stress goes on and on and on much longer and in a much more damaging way than if those cues were not present. Sleep deprivation is associated with depression, and it also causes stress and learning problems. Sleep disturbance is a particularly toxic byproduct of environmental noise. The impact during the day is people are less awake, less alert, less aware. They will probably have increased problems learning, retaining information, sustaining concentration and attention. Additionally, sleep deprivation is associated with increased irritability and increased susceptibility to other stressors in the environment. You're going to find people who have a lower tolerance for frustration, people that may try to self-medicate. Individuals living in proximity to a high level of train traffic and their sense of alarm, especially about introduction of a second track, there would be an increased frequency of train traffic. There would be trains passing each other. The perceived risk of train accidents and the exposure to whatever the trains are carrying. There's an increased risk to their safety and the safety of their families and friends. If we were to consider the impact of adding a second track and the increased frequency of noise and vibration, we still don't know the impact long-term of neurological development in exposure to such a thing, and taking a risk that it could produce adverse effects longitudinally is something that I have grave concerns about. The studies that have been done thus far on noise, vibration, development, learning, stress, health are still in their infancy. The research is developing. We have studies, mostly out of Europe. But much more needs to be done. We need to know what we're doing and the impact on human beings and families, learning, development, and health before we begin experimenting with a population at large, at which point it becomes very difficult to turn back the clock and undo the damage.